All right, being 6 o'clock, we're going to call the work session to order. And the first item on the agenda is city manager's comments.
Sorry, I didn't even pay attention that
I know,
was
the
there.
agenda's there. Here you go. You're right in the front. You don't want me skipping or missing you this time.
I guess so. And I didn't make any lists of comments. It's been a day. So I don't have anything to add, I guess. I apologize.
Okay, council comments. We're going to get a whole different agenda here. So let's start with Drew.
I got nothing.
Lucinda.
Nicole, forgive me if this has already been mentioned, but when are we going to start projects for fixing streets and potholes, specifically D Street? I thought that was called out in our plan, and I was wondering, I don't need an answer at this moment, but if you would be so kind as to get back to me on that. I had a citizen ask about that, and I said I would ask at this evening's meeting.
Just so I speak accurately, can I follow up with you tomorrow?
Yep.
Great.
So D Street and East Side?
D Street and East Side, that is correct.
It has a really nice pattern all the way on the right-hand side of it.
Okay,
Quite a few potholes, so.
all right.
Great. Thank you.
Stephanie.
I don't have any.
But doesn't mean we can't come back around at the end, and if you have other
Yeah, I don't
comments,
have
we'll follow
anything.
up. How's that? Carmen is virtual, and Carmen, the agenda has council comments at the beginning, and Nicole had no comments this evening. But anyway, we're at council comments.
Hello.
Good evening.
So are you saying I should go ahead with council comments first?
Well, everyone else passed, so it's,
Oh.
except I take that
Sorry, I guess
back.
I missed
Lucinda
that
had one item, D Street. What she wanted to know about D
Oh,
Street.
yeah, D Street. Well, I am not prepared for my
Okay.
comments at the
Well,
moment.
we can come back around and have council comments at the end. I don't know, maybe
Okay.
Nicole did this because of me. So a couple things. I'd like to know what the council and Nate think about us. We talked about in the budget committee going after some entities or buildings that are run down. And the one specifically I'm talking about in downtown Coos Bay is, and I keep referencing, is the old Lemon Tree Bakery site, but we just shut it down for safety issues. And there was 4 retail businesses there, and there was some residential up above. So my comment to this council, and are we have the appetite to condemn this? We talked about potentially condemning it and then taking it on a quick take, which would, if I understand correctly, Nate, we get an appraisal and we pay that price. And then I would like to find a developer and maybe incentivize them with some urban renewal money, but also sell that property and try to get the money back or recoup it. Anyway, Nate.
We first start off with a nuisance abatement process, substandard or dangerous building, and which gives the owner an opportunity to abate the nuisance, assuming he doesn't abate the nuisance. And I think that's a good situation, a likely situation there. The city would have to step in and then abate the nuisance, whether we're talking about rehabbing the building or tearing it down. Obviously the city would acquire a lien with respect to the money that's involved there. And I mean, it'd be very similar to the Lockhart situation, where we basically demoed the building, and then, we've decided to do something different on that than development per se. We've got a parking lot there, which is needed. But if you are able then to own the property, you could theoretically sell it to someone who could develop it, whether on favorable terms or fair market value.
So what my concern is that we're letting these buildings get to a point that there is no value or they deteriorate to such an issue that it costs the city a lot of money. Lockhart Building's a perfect example.
Oh, yeah.
Cost us $550,000. It was not worth $550,000. And then we just put $1.5 million into the parking lot. Now, I'm not saying that the parking lot's not justified and something that's beautiful, and I appreciate that. But, I mean, I can start seeing this happening in other buildings downtown because these owners, out-of-state owners, are not doing anything with them, and they're letting it deteriorate, and we seem to have no recourse.
Well, we do have recourse. We have to get reports. Obviously, if there's structural problems we don't know about, there's not much we can do about it. But I get in on the tail end of it. I'm not too sure where we're at in terms of trying to address ongoing problems. But we do, it's a question of the will of the council, how much you want to push on it and how much you're willing to pay for it, because it's
So-
expensive. And if you're talking residential property, if someone's living on that property, their ownership, they own it, they live on it, you can foreclose on it, but you're going to have to pay up to $40,000 in homestead exemption. So there are issues, and it's not a cheap situation, absolutely not.
But the commercial property I'm referenced, we're not in that situation.
No, I don't think so.
And I think we've already, because of structural issues, we've closed it up, right? Yes, it is closed up.
Yeah,
It's closed, it's closed.
the building is secured. It's been vacated and
Right.
it's secured
Right.
currently.
So, and it's,
I was going to try to look up and see if I could tell exactly where it was in the process, but we have taken steps to notify the owner of the issues and to give them a definitive timeline by which they need to act. And I don't know if this is one that has yet gone to hearing off the top of my head, but that was going in that direction.
so we have to go in that fashion. We can't just say, okay, we're taking this thing over.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right. Even though we know it needs to be.
It's something called due process.
All right, due process, okay, I get it.
When does eminent domain come in then?
Eminent domain would be that's a different animal altogether. That's where you see a piece of property, whether it's dilapidated or not, and the city actually takes the property, compensates the owner for the reasonable value of the property, and then uses it for the public good. I mean, we see that, highways, that kind of thing all the time. But you have to pay reasonable compensation to the owner for the property.
Yeah,
That's a
and
different animal than what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I'm not
but
saying
it's
that's,
expensive as well.
that we wouldn't reimburse whatever the value is. That's not what I'm indicating. But,
No,
but this building cannot be utilized in that fashion, right?
No, the building you're talking about now be one we would proceed under the nuisance abatement substandard dangerous
Okay.
building and go that route. And that sounds like that's exactly where we're headed in that
Okay.
direction.
All right.
But it does take some time, but, and I know council can be impatient at times.
Well, it's not that, I've watched, again, I'm just gonna reference the Lockhart building. I've watched these individuals and owners
Sure.
just utilize or take advantage of the city, and it's because of the process. It's a tax write-off for them, it's
Yeah.
out-of-state owners, there was no benefit to us.
They don't live here.
Yeah, and so, and this same individual owns a conquistador, right? Yes.
So
don't know.
I'm wondering, and maybe,
Sorry. Yeah.
maybe Chelsea can chime in
And
a little
others.
bit on this, but would this be something that could be an agenda point for the Economic Vitality Committee for the Coos Bay Downtown Association? It is a group that is made up of not just council, but also city developers, maybe to identify some of the properties that we have in downtown that are issues and what we might be able to do to assist the city in this and involve them in this conversation.
Well, no.
I appreciate your comments, Councilor Kilmer. I think where I stand, I remember Mayor Benetti brought something like this up in about 2018, and I was not supportive at the time of wanting to do something like this. But as I walk the community and I drive around this community in 2024, nearly 8 years later, I don't have that same mentality anymore. The Gussie's building is a perfect example for me. The dry cleaner right next to it is a perfect example for me of, and these are the buildings that our citizens are concerned about too, and these are the buildings that are attracting people to try to find a place to live, and that isn't good either. And so I honestly have lost a bit of patience, and while I appreciate perhaps having the livability committee look at it, I think as a council,
Economic vitality.
sorry, forgive me, Economic Vitality Committee look at it, I honestly think, for me, I'm ready to make a decision. I'm ready to say, if we do have due process, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate your teasing remarks that council is impatient, because I think we're not. Well, sometimes we are, but not in this instance. But what I would ask staff is this: when does the clock start ticking? Because we
On
are
Gussie's.
on all of them, because we are really, really kind and patient, and we
Well,
want to, let me finish, and we want to help businesses. So I want to know if we are consistent when that clock starts, that we are doing the same process each time to let these business owners know, oh, hey, if I don't take care of this building, there are going to be consequences to that decision. Sorry, Councilor Kilmer. Go ahead, I got passionate.
So I think, go ahead, I apologize, Chelsea, I didn't see you answer.
Well, I would like to say that the clock starts ticking the moment we are made aware of or, of a substandard dangerous building under that code, and that we then send the letter and start to act. I was just looking up 383 Anderson, and it appears on February 7th, the hearings officer, so it did go to hearing, and they issued a final order, and it gave them a timeline by which they needed to give plans and permit applications to the city within 60 days of that time. So we've passed the February 7th date in the 60 days thereafter to abate the nuisance, to deal with that. And I think that that's what's been addressed as far as boarding up the building. That's why we've acted in that manner. But then it also said you have 240 days from February 7th to complete repairs and or demo the building. So 240 days from February 7th is, we're probably getting closer to that timeline, at which point it says the city will then act and do. So in that instance, I think that we're making progress on to the point where the city will then step in.
Okay.
Gussie's, I don't know, haven't, but I imagine it's similar.
So I think with Stephanie's point, and I think can be some advantage taken with that committee. I mean, we already know about this one, but I think there's some other ones maybe downtown that we're not aware of
Well,
that they can bring to our
that was
attention.
what I was going
Right.
to interject is, how many are we talking, and can they help us identify something so that we don't have to get down the road this far to where, I mean, we're literally, the building is falling apart and it's dangerous. So is there something that committee can do to identify?
I think it's fair
With the city.
to say these are kind of the criteria maybe that we look for, and can you help make us aware with the understanding that we only have so much staff time and resources, right? So they can only handle pursuing so many of those at once. But the more eyes, it's kind of like if you see something, say something. If we can get a list and start prioritizing, I think that's in help from people in the downtown.
And same with Empire, the
Yeah.
Community Coalition of Empire. I feel kind of like, I don't want to get into a situation where somebody goes, well, it's a lost cause, I'm going to lose money on it, so I might as well just let it fall in on itself. And so at some point, the city's going to step in and they're going to take care of it because I let it go as a property owner. I don't want to get in a situation, because we don't have deep pockets like that.
No.
So we need collaboration with these property owners, and how can we be successful in making a positive change instead of just saying, I mean, that is to me the last resort. We got to take it down because it's going to fall down and it's a dangerous situation. But we've been kicking the can down the road with a couple of buildings in, Empire and downtown for years. And I don't know that we're in any different place today as we were when we originally brought this up in 2016.
Yeah, so Gussie's would be one of them, I guess, question, because we were moving forward, and that's been something we've been dealing with for quite a while, and I understand they just took out a permit? Well,
Yeah,
they
my
just-
understanding, they pulled a building permit and there was so much time to act
So that
upon
180 days is running out here shortly, right?
Do they have that permit?
I don't know that permit has been issued. I
So
think
we're
still
3
in the
months
time.
out from that original notification that they were pulling a permit, and the clock doesn't start ticking until that permit is issued.
So if they don't happen to provide the information needed within the allotted time to make the permit a solid application and get it issued, then I think we have steps to take
Okay.
to,
All right, good. Thanks, Chelsea.
yeah.
All right, that was one item. And then the other ones I had, guys, is the parking on 8th Street Terrace that we talked about behind the ball field. That is parking that's allowed because it's, what?
It's in the right of way, so it's a, like street parking, street side
So
parking.
because of it, we have a vehicle that's been sitting there, full of items, and parked. Chief, is that correct?
Yes.
And so we can't do anything about it because of the way it's zoned, right? Or because it's in
So
the right
that
of
probably
way.
has the same standards any parking along a streetway. Like if it's not moving over a certain period of time, we're gonna go by and again, we'd have to know. So, I mean, we know about this one. You can't permanently park on a city street without moving it.
But this one's been there for weeks.
Yeah, so this one, it's a little unique in the fact that it is being used as a parking lot, so they're parking it, they are moving it. And so you basically, in that city right-of-way parking, they have 72 hours. It's not like a parking lot where you have 24 hours, they have 72 hours. But if they're moving it or driving it, then that time starts all over. The other issue is it's not really fallen under unlawful vehicle ordinance because it's registered and licensed. And so it's kind of one of those vehicles that has kind of fallen through the cracks, per se. There's not a real good way for us to address it, and it just constantly moves around different parking stalls, so.
But when you tag it, it's 72 hours anywhere, right?
So they're allowed to park there for 72 hours. Once we observe it beyond 72 hours, we have to tag it. And then at that point, it starts the abandon process, which is technically they get the orange sticker you've probably all seen, and then they have 10 days to remove that vehicle. If it's moved before 10 days, then we kind of start the process over again, unless it's unlawful. And the only way that it falls in the unlawful category is, as you probably remember in that in our tow ordinance, there's specific causes that would make a vehicle unlawful: inoperable, leaking sewage, no registration, no insurance. There's several other clauses. So if a vehicle is outside of that, then basically it just keeps reverting back to either extended parking issues and or abandoned vehicle issues. And so
Okay.
we're looking at it from both angles. If it is unlawful, then we can post it, and if it goes beyond the 10 days, then they get the green sticker that gives them the last 24 hours. And at that point, if it's found anywhere within the city, it still remains unlawful, then we can impound it at that point.
So is this our ordinance? Is this something that we've drafted, and these are the criteria that we set?
Yes. this
So we
is
can
our-
change it?
It's set by the ordinance, but it's also governed by state statute,
Okay,
so.
so
yes.
that's a little bit different.
And maybe there's a piece we could look at, although I think we talked about this already, about, the vacation of the right-of-way so that it could be a parking lot instead of a right-of-way. I don't know that that's an option in this instance, though.
But this one area we're talking about, I don't know if you're familiar with it, there's like 8 or 10
Yeah,
spots. It looks like a parking lot, and it's usually used by the people at the ball field when they're playing. And so, I mean, I understand where it's
it's
at
just in the
now.
platted
But there's still
right-of-way.
availability for residential parking across the street. So this is just a bonus, I guess, and it's being taken advantage of. So I don't know. That's my opinion.
So does that change if somebody is living in a vehicle?
Yeah, so if somebody's living in a vehicle and it's inside a residential neighborhood, then it's gonna fall under our camping ordinance. And you cannot camp in a residential neighborhood unless you're on private property and you're in the front yard or in the backyard. And remember, we can have a motorhome in the front yard and a tent in the backyard. But if you're on a residential street or a city right-of-way and you're camping in your vehicle, then technically you're in violation of our city ordinance. And we are addressing those as we see them, or we receive calls, reports, we go out. Sometimes it's difficult, but because if somebody doesn't, especially when you're dealing with vehicles that you can't hardly see inside, if somebody doesn't actually come to the door and, let the officer address them, then sometimes it's difficult to determine whether or not somebody's living in it.
So that's not residential.
So they're not, in this instance, they're not living in this vehicle.
No, not to my knowledge, and
Okay.
we've had multiple contacts. we obviously, as you can imagine, we're receiving some complaints from neighbors in that immediate area as well. And so we are monitoring that, but unless it's unlawful or it's parked there beyond 72 hours, we don't have a whole lot of mechanism to address that.
So
And
does
just to
this
be clear, that's through the state, not our ordinance. That's, the state doesn't allow us to do anything different. Is that correct?
So it's a combination of state statutes and our city ordinances, but when we reviewed our city ordinance in relation to our illegal or unlawful towing of vehicles, we kind of really revamped that, and I'd say we went as far as we can with that ordinance and still falling under state law. Yeah.
But I think this might be, I mean, I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but this one, if there's a possibility of changing it to a parking lot, this would change this situation to 24 hours, and it becomes a different
Yes,
issue.
so if you changed it to a parking lot, and if that's the direction that you guys chose, then yeah, it would fall under our city camping ordinance, so you wouldn't be allowed to camp there, as well as you're not, it would shorten from 72 hours to 24-hour duration. And there's a couple other factors that would apply to a parking lot.
So is that
You
something?
gotta
So-
remember,
Council-
oh, sorry.
Pardon,
You
go
gotta
ahead,
remember
Nick.
that would apply to all the people who live in that area too, who wanna park there.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I don't see, I guess, if it's taken advantage of, in this case, and I mean, I started walking by there because I walked by there this one time, I took a different route and I saw it, so I make a habit of going by there, and that's the only one I really see there on a permanent basis. Occasionally you'll see another car there, but it's not like they're parked there on and on. So
Have we tried talking to the individuals that own the car?
It's,
We've had multiple
yeah,
contacts.
this is, you need to go by.
And
I'm gonna have
I think
to.
it's also connected with the house that I think our code enforcement person might be interacting with, so.
That is
So
correct.
I'm curious, is there a way to change the right-of-way parking limits? I mean, can you, I mean, does the state statute?
I'm trying to make sure I understand. Are you
I mean, can you
asking
limit?
whether or not we can
can we limit
shorten that
it?
duration of 72 hours? I would have to look that up and see what state statute requires. The only concern I would have with that is on-street parking is utilized by a lot of residents and community members. And if you shorten that, I don't know if, you know, they would be able to park their vehicles in the manner they do for like even through the weekend sometimes. And also the limited resources, staffing resources, I don't know if we could manage that.
So, are we interested in looking into this being possibly a parking lot, and having staff come back with, if that's even possible?
Yes.
Drew? Sure. Carmen?
Yes, I concur.
Yeah, Stephanie?
I'm fine with,
Okay.
I'm always fine with looking at options.
All right. Well, now we can get
I
to
also understand that we may be creating some unintended consequences.
we could, but I think if we do nothing, that could be a situation too. But at least this will give us an idea whether we can or can't, and then we can make a decision.
And I always commend this council for making informed decisions, so this would be yet another example of that.
Okay, very well put. All right, let's get to the agenda. Thank you for bearing with me and through this. Anyway, review of the upcoming city council URA board actions and city council decide, provide direction regarding street improvement requirements for infill development. Jim and Jennifer.
Good evening. I'll start this one off.
Okay,
Back in February, we did present this to you. Just for a refresher, I'll go over the background and then pass it along to Jennifer, who did, of course, the bulk of the work.
got too many maps here.
The city street standards guide the current design requirements for the construction of new city streets. Engineering standards focus on the traffic or pedestrian safety, drainage control, and sustainability of the asset. Unless related to a new subdivision, the current engineering standards do not have triggers for when these improvements are required. In other words, development of a single residential lot adjacent to an unimproved right-of-way would not be required by the engineering standards to install full-width improvements. However, the fire code standards focus on providing the minimum requirements for safe and adequate access by fire apparatus. The standards protect fire, life, and safety and are sensible, but have become increasingly expensive to meet. Many infill projects are accessed by unopened or unimproved city right-of-way or existing gravel streets or paths even. Examples will be provided momentarily by Jennifer. The fire code requires a minimum all-weather, either asphalt or concrete surface to be 20 feet wide and in some cases wider, and a turnaround may also be required. Developers of individual lots are stating that if they have to install curb, gutter, sidewalk, and if necessary, storm drain infrastructure, in addition to the 20-foot all-weather access required by fire code, it is cost prohibitive. However, not installing curb, gutter, and drainage improvements will more than likely reduce the life of the all-weather access for which the city would be responsible for maintenance and or replacement. Furthermore, not installing curb, gutter, restricts the ability for the city to maintain the street with a sweeper vehicle. Also, not installing sidewalks reduce the connectivity and potentially the livability. The trigger point for requirement of these improvements is development of any single lot. While it is understood that requiring these improvements may stifle some development, it will protect the taxpayer's street asset. And now that's all I have with the report, and Jennifer will answer your questions from February.
Okay. So as Jim mentioned, we met in February, and I think the general consensus was that everybody agreed that sidewalks are good for livability, but council wanted to understand the cost impacts. And so just a quick little background. Right now, our engineering standards has 3 cross sections for local and neighborhood streets. And they cover a 50-foot right-of-way and a 60-foot right-of-way, which is typical. But you'll see a 28-foot, a 36-foot, and a 40-foot standard residential cross-section. So that 28, 36, and 40 refers to the AC cross-section, so the width of the AC. There still is in these cross-sections, as you can see, sidewalks, buffers, as well as some planting areas like in that 40-foot standard residential. So the next slide, and I should mention, these slides are exactly what I put in front of you. Okay, great. The next slide is just a breakdown of trying to figure out what is the cost per foot. So going down in kind of the order of how you're going to construct this, you have the aggregate that you need to install, the asphalt, the curb and gutter, the sidewalk, and the storm drain. But what I came across is there was all these additional costs that just vary depending on the size of the project, the topography, and maybe even geotechnical constraints. And those include design, mob, demob, site prep, geofabric, driveways, catch basins, ADA ramps, and manholes. And again, it just has to do with the limits of construction. So I then said, well, let's do a case study. And so this is Seagate Street, and north is, I guess, pointing to your right. I had to flip it 90 so it would fit on this slide. And there's an infill lot just there to the north that I've highlighted in red. And as you can see, Seagate ends. The infill lot is about 170 feet away from where that would end. And the nearest storm drain is about almost 400, it's 390 feet. And so what would it take to implement those standards, those cross sections you saw? What would it take here? And so we assumed a 36-foot standard residential. And so that's parking on both sides and sidewalks on both sides. And so I went through the first 3 kind of items that really do vary a lot. And those are design, mobilization and demob with the contractor, and site prep. And I put in those numbers that you see there. I think it's a total, let me just move the slide. It's So those first 3 lines total about $20,000. I put in the note that I think that's low, but all these costs are gonna go up and down depending on who's doing the work, bidding, time of year. And so I think the idea is just to understand the magnitude of costs, knowing that if you give this to 3 different engineers and 3 different contractors, you're gonna get 6 different prices, so. So going down, the aggregate, I based, all the prices below and the quantity and the unit prices, I based on our projects from last year. We had 5 that I pulled from, and if there was an anomaly, I threw that out, but they were all kind of right in line, and so I just took the average. So I pulled quantities for the aggregate, the asphalt, the curb and gutter, the sidewalk, the driveway approach, because to talk about this case study, I'm going to go back 1 slide. So our infill lot is a double lot, but if you look across to the other side of the street, there is the potential for 3 lots to be there. That's how it's platted. So there's, from like a proportionate share standpoint, there's 4, maybe 5, depending if you count that infill lot as a double lot of potential lots that can be developed. So going back. So on the driveway approaches, I assumed 4, but that could be changed to 5, which would increase cost, but when you look at proportionate share, it might decrease each of the lots' proportionate share. Let's see, storm drain, because you have to take the storm drain all the way up to the edge of the development so it can continue as those other lots further north get developed. Catch basin, I assumed we're going to need 2 right there at the intersection, and then 1 manhole, that's per our standards. And then, unfortunately, this intersection doesn't meet ADA today. So one may argue that maybe that's a city responsibility, and we could just remove that because you have a cost right here. But adding all this up, you're right under $400,000. So I might just stop there because that was a lot of information. I probably should have stopped halfway through.
So the cost for the ADA is the city's responsibility or the developer's responsibility?
Typically, it's the developer's responsibility.
So the other thing I have a question about is that we have 4 of the lots, if I understood correctly, right? Besides the infill lot, 3 or 4?
Well, 4, maybe 5. So
Okay.
that infill lot's a double lot, but then there's also 3 platted lots on the other side of the street.
So the individual that wants to move forward on this, or the developer on this one parcel, is the infill lot. So if they do all this, then how is those costs going to be appropriated to the others if they're developed out?
So the city has a couple mechanisms, and I may look to Nicole and Jim, and we have a recovery fee and a local improvement district mechanism. And it depends who fronts the cost, whether the city fronts the cost or whether the developer fronts the cost. And then they recoup them as those other lots get developed. You want to add anything? Great.
Okay, all right.
So potentially, this isn't going to just land on one developer. If it's developed out, then they'll recoup those costs.
So there's a little caveat to that. There's usually a time frame on both of those local improvement districts or recovery fees. It's typically 10 years with a 10-year extension if that's worked into the agreement. Thank you, Nicole.
So definitely the recovery fees, there's usually a timeline associated with that because we generally are the ones who've gone, do some work, or the one property's doing that. So they have this period of time they can recoup. And then the LID, the local improvements, we have gone potentially and done that work. So those, historically, I don't see a timeline on those. We are still available to receive some funds from the 70s. So, that tells you we are not recouping those back. Traditionally, those would settle with us when the house changes hands. Those need to be made good on, paid off. However, there's a variety of ways in which they were or were not recorded with the county, and so some of them were not caught up when they did change hands. So could we do better? Yeah, we probably could do better in the future and find ourselves in a better place to get that reimbursed to us. But
So a question on it then, it sounds like those were already developed properties and there was kind of a situation that occurred maybe with recording. But in this situation where we have lots that could potentially be developed, are we in a better position to be able to collect those fees?
So I think
in a more
his-
timely frame.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
30
his-
years, 40 years, 50 years down the road isn't going to do us any good.
Right.
We might as well just pay for it.
There is a period of time, though, that we, that they would theoretically be required to be paid off, and 10 is probably a fair time period. The challenge that we had is some of those were not recorded, so they were not on as a lien of sorts on the property. We would, of course, do, a better job making sure that those were. So if it did change hands, we would be repaid what was the value of that lien.
I guess I hear Phil Marler in my head, former Councillor Marler, and I also hear Councillor Cribbins in my head of what type of community do we want to live in. I remember when this was brought up, and I also remember listening to Councillor Marler talk about those terrible gravel roads, and is this really the community we want to live in? And while these numbers look really big, I know for one, I want to live in a community that has sidewalks. I want walkability. I want livability. I know it's a buzzword right now, but I think as we sit on this dais, it is our responsibility to make sure that we're leaving this place, right, better for future generations. And so I don't know the solution to dollars and cents, but I truly believe that we should do our due diligence and make sure that we do have sidewalks and all the things to make this community as appealing and as beautiful as possible.
And I think, to your point, the costs aren't going to go down. So it's a bargain 5 years down the road. If we were, I agree.
I don't disagree. I think I understand that, but do we really want to front these dollars that we might never recoup? I mean, are they going to develop that property? I mean, we're going to put out $400,000, and there'll be a portion paid to the infill. We recoup, right? But the others, we could be sitting here waiting, and can we afford that?
So I think we would initially, and again, your choice, I think we would initially recommend that who's ever developing this fronts those costs, and there would be a mechanism by which they would recover their fees.
So the other question I have, can we appropriate the other portion for those lots in this development now? Can we ask them, say, okay, you need to pay your fair share now on these lots?
I think that's always an option with that.
I mean, is it an option,
Yeah.
or is it something that we can initiate? They'd have to agree to it, though, right?
The way the code's written currently is when they take access or connect to the improvement, that's when they pay their proportionate share. So that's how the code's written now. I guess we could, if it's not dictated by state law, we could probably try to make it once we complete the job.
You don't seem too positive on that, Jim. You think there might be some pushback, huh?
Well, I'm wondering, Jim, in your experience, I mean, have you seen that in other communities? The very thing that we're asking for?
No.
Okay, well, that doesn't, we could set ourselves apart and be different, which there's nothing wrong with that, but okay, thank you.
I don't know. I think we could theoretically look into it and see if we could appropriate the funds and cost on that or not, and then see what happens. Maybe it would help stimulate development also. Carmen?
Yeah, this is an interesting discussion. I am worried that, these things need to be installed. I think we need to be a community that takes pride in our built environment and that it encourages multimodal transportation, walking, bike paths, all of these things, but that comes at a huge cost. And we keep on hearing that it's difficult to build in Coos Bay, and part of it is, rising costs in general, which is affecting all communities. So as I'm sitting here listening, I'm really trying to rack my brain as to how we can incentivize development while also asking for what we want in our development. And I really don't have, I have not settled on where what I feel about this. All I know is I do want to see these pieces of infrastructure continue to be the bar at which we hold developers to. So as we move forward, I'd like to see if the city could somehow appropriate the funds to make this work for developers. But I still think I need to just roll it around in my head more.
Troy?
Hi, this is Troy. I actually was able to attend and have caught the last few minutes. I guess the first thing I would think of is, can we afford not to? We want to encourage development. And again, I think it's been said by the other counselors, we want multimodal transportation. We want nice sidewalks. We want walkability. We want to encourage development. We want this place to be a place that draws people to it. And I don't know that it ever gets any cheaper. And I think probably the easiest and most cost-effective time to do it is when it's going in, not having to come back and retrofit. But much like everyone else, I'm not sure how we figure out those costs. But I do think as a council, if we were unified and moving forward saying, this is what we want our city to look like, we could then, spend the effort in figuring the cost part of it out.
Just so if a developer comes in, like the Red Moon development by Cascade Farms, also they did a development across on, was it off North Bend Medical Center? What's that development? Brookside. They had to put in streets, they had to put in sidewalks. At some point that had to be done. Any development you have to look at, that needs to be done. So, we expect this for other developers and developments and housing issues. So why wouldn't we want it here? It's just that for this individual to have to pay the portion of $374,000 and front it all, I don't see how that's equitable or fair, I guess. And I'm not sure how to get around it. It's just one of these situations.
I would agree with that because I think we want to work with our developers. We want to make that a smooth transition and help them be able to do that. So maybe there's some way we can work around how we spread that out or back end it or something to that effect so they can, they can still develop and make a profit and we can get the sidewalks.
I think it's imperative that we do that, and I don't think we move forward with a hard and fast rule on this until we actually talk with some developers. If this is just gonna be one of those things where they say, well, then I'm just not gonna do development in Coos Bay, there's other places I can develop, then we're hurting ourselves.
Well, but that's
There's gotta be a compromise to where we can be part of it and encourage development at the same time they're helping, build a better community by developing and adhering to these standards. So I think we gotta find the happy medium.
But these standards, I don't know, Chelsea, you might know. If you go to North Bend and you see the development there, they're doing the same thing. Streets, sidewalks, sewer, stormwater. This is common practice. This isn't something that's out of the realm. What's happening here is you have an individual that wants to build here. Am I correct?
Yeah, and I guess, the bigger picture in this instance is you're not really maybe talking about a developer, but a landowner. And so let's, put some parameters, like this is mom and pop kind of potentially in these infills. They're not larger organizations. And then I would also add, if we want to do something where we are attempting to help, we got to take something else off. So we only have a finite source of resources for streets. You guys have been great with your efforts to implement the transportation utility fee, but that ends up being our street dollars. And are we going to divert some of that in order to do this infill?
Yeah, so I guess the council, if you wished, you could use tough money that we've initiated for potholes and streets towards this. I'm not saying this is something I would advocate, but that's an option.
I didn't see that as what that money was used for.
No,
I
it's
agree.
not.
And
It's
Counselor,
not.
I think Kilmer and I are both chomping at the bit to say that is not what we told the citizens that we were going to spend our dollars
I
on.
know, but it's to fix streets and do whatever. So anyway, and also if you look over here, they have a development in sidewalks and streets and whatever else really close to it. So I know it's an awkward situation, and I don't know what the right answer is.
Does
Nicole,
that-
you should just fix this and
Does
make it
this
work.
case study connect to other roads? Farther down, is there?
To the north?
Yeah.
Or to the right? No, I did not do that, but there is a road to the north, but I believe it's gravel.
I guess my question is this lot been purchased? I mean, did the owner already? Or
I
the-
think we're having these conversations because we are in this predicament of how do we help this person develop on this lot and also meet the current standards.
Carmen?
Yeah, I was just wondering, how does the local improvement district work? Like, how are those payments made? Is that made like during collection of yearly taxes, or is it a monthly thing? How does that work?
Well, currently it doesn't, but my understanding of the process is there's an amount, there's calculations, obviously the total amount, the calculations are then divided by those that benefit from this. And there is a regular billing process. It's also should be a lien on the property so that it clears if it changes hands. And so they are given the opportunity to pay as they go in the time period that's allotted. They could pay, a quarter at a time. The payment can be up to them based on what they can afford, for sure. But if it was going to work perfectly, it would be a monthly payment back to the city.
But for a local improvement district to happen or be set up, the property owners have to agree to do this. So what you would have to happen is this vacant lot, the owner would have to vote and agree to it, which I don't see happening, maybe I'm wrong, under this circumstance. Troy?
Yeah, so the development, is this one person building one home?
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, there's got to be a way we can help out with that. If it was a developer, he was building 4 or 5 and was going to sell those, I think it's an easier decision. But is there a way we could do that?
Well,
Front-end it and have them pay us back?
we could front the money. I mean, we could take it out, but if, as Nicole said, this comes right out of our general fund, because this is not in a situation where we have funds available. I mean, we already don't, I don't think the council already made it clear they don't want to use tough funds, but there's no other avenue that I'm aware of that we have available except our general fund dollars.
Is the larger lot divided, or is it one owner?
Currently, it's one owner.
It's what?
Currently, it is one owner.
On the larger lot across the street?
The infill lot? Oh, the larger lot, I'm sorry. No, it hasn't been divided yet.
Okay, because if there's a potential for 5,
It's been platted, it's just.
platted
hasn't-
for 5, I think we could work with this infill lot landowner and say, look, this is the potential and here's what your cost would be. Then it wouldn't be as much to the city and as much to the property owner.
So for clarification, this is just a case study. This is not an actual example.
Right.
And then the 5, there's 3 across the street, and then the infill lot is 2 lots. So that's how I got to 5.
Right.
Well, wait a second. I know it's a case study, but this is the request. Is that correct?
There actually was a situation for a property, I think it was immediately to the north of this case study, but that was resolved implementing the policy that was attached to your staff report. And we correct? Was that your understanding, Chelsea? Sorry, not to put you on the spot. Anyways, I believe that was the result, and I can confirm that.
So what I'm hearing is this is great news. This situation has prompted us to make a decision going forward, and since this is a case study, we're not in this situation with one individual.
Yes.
And so now we can have the bigger picture conversation of how we want these type of projects to move forward. And I think there is, the council did agree that we do want sidewalks and we do want all of these things with developers. And we don't have a situation right now where it's just one individual. I totally missed that.
Yeah.
Did you miss it?
No.
No, sorry. Okay.
It's all right. So who's first? Carmen, I guess you're next.
Yeah, so, I'm looking here and I see, if you zoom out from this particular space, there is a 15+ acre parcel just to the east of this. So instead of going north towards the infill lot, if you go left towards the east, or I guess that's west, there's 15 acres of land, and there's many undeveloped pieces of property just outside of this little intersection. I realize that the the cost is prohibitive to get even to the end of this infill lot. But I see, a potential for a lot of, I guess, funds coming back to the city if there was the ability to help with some of this infrastructure in some way, shape, or form. I mean, 15 acres sitting right there on the water seems developable. We need housing. I know that doesn't mean that it's available for, discussion of development, but getting this infrastructure line kind of thing figured out. I realize this is just a case study, but looking around at the surrounding areas and seeing the potential for more residential family dwellings, the investment on behalf of the city might be worth it if we can recoup some of those costs as we have liens on properties for people developing down the line. So it's definitely not off the table in my head to help with this infrastructure in some way, shape, or form.
Troy? Or you just left your hand up?
Yeah, no, sorry, I don't know how to take it off, but I'll look at that. I pretty much echo with Carmen, but I think I might be more resolute in saying I think that's something we have to do.
So
And
just,
I know, go ahead.
go ahead. Well, so what I'm going to both of you, and I guess to the council in general, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and if we did this, if I'm understanding you correctly, we go ahead and do this development with the intent and have this infill pay one portion, and then we front the money with the hope that there will be development on these other 15 acres. And I think that's great thought, but we have, for instance, Red Moon, who's put in $2 million in development by Cascade Farm for 400 homes, and we're not helping with that in development, which is ready to go. We have the 16 acres that Barry Hospital we're working with that Chelsea has put together, and we got a grant to do a site development. Are we going to help with that development? And so I guess where does it stop, and where do we have the money that we lay out in this fashion? I mean, I think we need to do it. I know this is where we keep asking the state for help. If they want workforce housing, we need some help with infrastructure, this type of infrastructure, to do it for these developers. I mean, if we had a development that came in and said, look, I'm willing to develop these 15 acres and develop 15, 16, 17 homes or whatever it may be, then I think it's a good way to go. But I don't know if we have that information right now. Carmen?
I agree. We don't have that information, and it does seem unfair to have another developer come in and pay for that on their own when we're not helping them. My guess is, I mean, they have to go through all the permitting processes just as we would as the city to install this infrastructure. But instead of us helping pay for that note in some way, there is a more holistic, their approach to it is a more like unified, larger scale, planned development that is under their purview, and then they can wrap those costs into the value of their property because of the cost of construction, which I, of course, understand raises the cost per unit and makes it potentially harder to sell. However, on the other side, since we're not having a planned development on a large scale, these little chunks in which we get closer to maybe a larger development, or we get to maybe put more developed homes on the tax rolls, the price might not come out in the initial purchase of a piece of property, but the lien itself that would be on that improvement based on the city's work would get reimbursed to the city in some way, I'm guessing. So to me, I think that the price of it comes back somehow. Somebody's gonna have to pay for it. So with these larger developments, yeah, we might not be helping, but it's part of them having control over their entire development that makes sense to me. It is a huge cost, and if there's ways in which we have to be creative in finding solutions to help them achieve their goals of development, I guess maybe it's a case by case issue. I don't know.
Yeah, I
But
know.
I think the case by case, we don't have the money for that. I mean, I think now that I understand the topic, forgive me, I guess I'm a little bit more hard-nosed in the sense that, to Councilor Kilmer's point, yeah, it's got to be done, and yeah, we should do it, and no, we shouldn't. I mean, we should do the same for all. And I know that we are a council who wants to, help the one-offs. But again, we're talking about the future of this community. It's not about a one-off. And I think that we should stick to our guns and say, this is what it looks like. Because to your point, Mr. Mayor, North Bend is doing it and other cities are doing it. And I don't want a developer to come to this community just because it's cheaper to do things and you don't have to put sidewalks in and you don't have to do all the things that most cities require.
I think you can get where the direction, first of all, I don't know enough about this, which is one of the reasons that I go back to, just because of what Carmen and Troy said, that we need to talk to the developers and see where their head is with this. I mean, I do not want to stifle development. And at the same time, however, I know where I stand, but I don't have that expertise because I'm not out building anything. So I still feel like, yeah, I know where my head is, but I also want to make sure I have all the information from the people who are doing the work. Jennifer.
And I agree, but I think I would really be, I think we would be remiss if we varied from the standards that we have set for all developers at this point. Now, we can look into it and see, would they rather do it, without streets and gutters and stormwater? Sure, they could just do strip paving, but I don't think that's what we want. I mean, I guess that's something we could do, but I don't see that being a benefit to us at all. Unfortunately, this is affecting one individual, and I feel bad for them, but, I think some due diligence on their part is necessary. First of all, I think they should have contacted the city. Second of all, I would be contacting these people across the street who owns this lot and see if there's a way I could work something out. Then come back to us and say, look, they'll do a development, and then maybe we can figure something out. Yes, Jennifer?
So I think it's a great idea to contact developers, but the developers, the large developers that do subdivisions, and subdivisions is defined as what, 3 or 4? 4 or more homes. So it's these one-offs that we deal with, quite frankly, a lot more than the subdivisions. And that's kind of what this discussion is more centered around. The subdivisions, we've got land use, we've got planning, and there's triggers for what they have to do. So that's not the basically guidance or direction that staff is asking from council. It's these one-offs in this area. There's a lot of undeveloped land in South Empire that's parceled out that also we face challenges with routinely.
We have a developer right now that has 13 lots in Empire, right? Adam Rutherford, right? Is it 13, 14?
Oh, I'm not sure how many, but he has quite a few.
If we gave him the development for the infrastructure, these roads, and he would build homes now. And we would talk, how many? 40 different?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, 40 homes. So I guess if we're going to invest, let's invest in something that we know is going to happen and build 40 homes. And we try to get a grant from the state for him. And I think there's others that we can't. So what I'm saying is I think that we need to be cautious how we move forward, as Jennifer said, these one-offs. If this developer here would have to go before the planning commission and with a development plan and to be approved, am I correct? No? On the 5 acres across the way?
The larger
Yes.
parcel, yeah, I believe it's over 5
Right.
acres, yeah, then you need to.
So the one across the street would have to come before the planning commission, would have to go through the process,
Not
right?
necessarily, because they have actually underlying a total of 7 platted lots. I mean, they could do 7 individual, single-family
Okay.
homes.
But more than likely, they
But-
would have to meet the criteria.
But we also know who these vacant property owners are. We have a vacant property owner list, so
So-
why aren't we communicating with them?
But,
to see-
but again, I
To
think
see if
it's,
they,
well, we could.
to encourage
but-
development, but also to answer our question.
But why not, okay, we could, but why not have this individual do the due diligence and contact them?
Oh, I agree. I mean, I would be doing that if I were in their
So I got a
shoes.
clarifier and a rabbit hole. A onesie doesn't have to meet the development standard at this moment, correct?
Well,
So how many one-offs in a row does it take before a full development of the road has to occur?
In the way our code reads, you can develop a house, and develop another house, and if you just don't do it together, it's not a subdivision.
So we can end up just with a long line of basically spit pavement and nothing else.
if you allowed it, but here, you're not allowing it. You could allow it, but they're suggesting we don't.
No, I'd say no, but
And they have to meet, all development has to meet development requirements.
yeah.
But the council implemented a policy that lessens those standards.
Yep.
And that's kind of how we've got here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And then the rabbit hole was the properties in Empire. At one point, long back, we talked about using urban renewal zones and the ability to use those to develop infrastructure from nothing. There was another city that was using its urban renewal zone to create the capital improvement of building the roads and the infrastructure in the first place. And it was just a thought to throw out there again, that if there are lots that we have within urban renewal zones that are in Empire, we could look at using URA funds to build up the roads that aren't there. And we had also talked about doing it with the library idea in John Toppitz. So it's a ways back there, and it's more recent that we may have that mechanism sitting there already.
Carmen?
I just wanted to clarify that I don't think that we should reduce the standards, and I also do believe that we need to keep it kind of even playing field. And so, Lucinda, to your remarks, I do agree that this is the standard we're going for, and I want to keep people at the standard, and one-offs are scary. I'm just looking at this and going, okay, so you buy this piece of property, and then you're like, oh, in order to get to my piece of property, I'm going to spend $400,000, and then it's just like, well, that's a tough pill to swallow. However, looking at this piece of property, I know that if I went to purchase this, I'd be like, well, I'm going to have to do some infrastructure to get to this point. So it's that would be the first question I would have asked. So is it fair to require this? Part of me says yes, but the other part of me is like, cost prohibitive part of it just means that we're just stifling the ability for people to build in these just barely outside of the developed street infrastructure buildable zones. And that you know, I really want to find a solution, that a way that we can say yes to the one-offs if we can. I don't know where that is, but I'm in agreement that I want to keep the standards high. I want to attract builders who want to build to a certain standard, not because we don't have standards. So, you know, I'm on board with where you're heading to.
I appreciate that, Carmen. I think what's most fascinating about this is in 2021, we did agree to do just that. And now we're sitting here having this conversation that we're like, no, we don't want to do that, because I will say for myself, I do want to help the one-offs. I do want to find a way to say yes. But I think we're in a situation, we just went through our budget, where we don't have the funds to always be able to say yes to those one-offs. And as difficult as that is for me, because I too am solutions oriented, I go back to, we have to make decisions, hard decisions that affect the long term, right? Not just the one-off. And that's all I have to say on it.
No, I feel for this individual, and I just wish that they would have done some due diligence. And what I mean by that, this isn't the only instance that's come up. Contacting staff, talking to our staff, they would get these answers and know them going in before they move forward on a project. And unfortunately, I mean, I've done it myself, not knowing, and pretty soon I find myself in a spot where it's cost me money, and I'm sure you've been in the same one, Carmen. And so, but it's something that you learn that you need to do, and if you don't, sometimes there's repercussions, and unfortunately, this individual is in a bad situation, and but I don't know how we can get there without us just paying it up front, and that means we're gonna take it out of general funds, and we don't have it. I mean, we just went through our budget, and I don't think we have $374,000 laying around right now, so, anyway. And Melissa's shaking her head and agreeing with me, and that's not often, so anyway.
I guess my question is, did we give staff the direction that they're looking for?
So are we agreed that we should hold the standards as we have them input at this point in time? We agree? We don't, no votes on this. Remember, this is a work session, so just consensus.
I thought the problem was that our current standards allow for the onesie problem.
So the issue is we still have that policy. So if it's the council's desire for us to come back to maybe talk about either amending or withdrawing that policy, that's something we can do, or whatever else you choose.
Is that what you want to do?
That's what I would propose.
Yep, staff recommendation.
Have staff come back with recommendations on this to
Change
redo
the
this,
ordinance to
change
keep
this
this
ordinance.
with the standards that proposed here. Okay. All right? Everyone?
We got a thumbs up from Troy.
Troy?
Yeah, I'm not sure the language we're discussing. I don't want to, it's a yes or no question. I don't want to vote maybe.
Well, there's a resolution that we have in place already on our agenda, and what we were saying is that we would come back and have staff change this resolution to follow the standards that were proposed tonight with streets and gutters and stormwater.
It's just a
I guess
consensus
that's what I was
to,
going to just confirm. If we were talking about making the standards high, that's what I'm in favor of.
Yes.
I did have a separate question. Is there a way to figure out on any given kind of project a per house cost to do that?
Well, I think
And
there
then-
is, but I think it depends, like, for instance, tonight, in this one off here, we'll talk about the sewer line or the stormwater line is 117 feet, which is, might not be the norm all the time, right?
Correct, and
Right, but
that's,
I guess I'm saying there must be some sort of standard, some sort of algorithm or calculation we can figure out generally the cost per residence is X. And then I think we were talking earlier about these large developers, they're building 400 homes. They have that cost figured in, and they've built that around to have a profit. And when we have those developers in, I do believe we want to work with them, help them, figure out what they need so that they can get their job done. It's a win-win for everyone.
We
And then when we
do,
have the one-offs, we should have some sort of an algorithm that says, this is what it costs, we can help you, but you gotta pay us back. And then we're set up for the rest of that street as it comes in of being covered or paid for, even if it's just one person, one person, one person.
yeah, but that 400 home development, I can guarantee you they're not paying $340,000, whatever, per residential facility.
100%, I guess that's my point, is he's paying this much because that's the entry into that. If he was developing that whole section, right, that cost wouldn't be that much. Or, it might be 500,000, but he'd be putting in 12 houses. But since they bought the one piece and they're just starting it,
So am I
they're gonna bear the
interpreting
brunt, right?
what you're saying, Counselor Crivens, is that this guy's ending up fronting the whole 374,000 because he's the first guy, and if I were in his shoes, this is my opinion now, I would want to wait until somebody else did it because they're going to front it up front. What
Or
you're
at least you
suggesting is perhaps maybe figuring out what that cost would be broken down per developable site on that street, and that's what I was trying to say earlier. Can we figure
Yes.
that out? Because that makes more sense to me than
Right,
making
and
this
that's a fair
guy
amount
pay
to
for it
assess
all.
him.
But then otherwise, we have to front the money.
No,
Well,
she's
that's
just
true.
asking
And
to
so then
figure it
that brings
out.
up the second question, is there a different way we can come up with resources to do that? Is there a funding source outside of the city where we could put a fund together that would take care of that until we got it paid back? Even like a low interest loan from the state to us to cover that.
Well, I don't know. It's still a loan that we would have to be obligated to and pay back. So, I mean, that's something that
just
we can
spitballing.
discuss if that's what we want to do. I guess my point, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here, we have somebody that's going to do 13 lots, and if we put infrastructure in, he'd build 40 units. I would rather us take that money and put it there, where I know we're going to get 40 units, and we're not going to get that here.
No, I agree, but again, if he's building 13 units, the price per resident is gonna be much cheaper than 350,000.
Correct.
Because he's gonna be able to defer that cost across the 40 units. So
So,
I'm for helping him get started, but he's
So-
gonna build that cost, or she is gonna build that cost into those properties.
so you're suggesting that we come up with a fit way to help this individual fund this?
I'm suggesting we come up with some sort of algorithm that figures out a per resident cost. Then we could figure out an algorithm of who we were gonna help and how much we were gonna help that would be equitable across the board.
But then you're suggesting that we fund them?
Yes.
Okay.
Or even if it's an upfront funding and then we get reimbursed as the property seller, I don't know the particulars, but there's gotta be some way, because when we wipe all this away from it, what we're talking about is we want nice streets, sewer systems, and sidewalks in our city. And if we just piecemeal it, or, it's okay here, but not okay there, then I don't think we're holding the standards that we, as I think I've heard the other counselors say, we want for our city.
Well, I think I heard from the council, the consensus was that we wanted to have streets, sidewalks, and that's why this resolution was being suggested to be changed and brought back to us by staff. I don't think anyone's suggesting that we lower the standard.
No, I guess I was confirming that. That was my agreement,
Right.
that we all want this. So there's got to be some method to come up with how we make this equitable across the board. Big developers down to a one-off.
Well, the only way that can happen, in my understanding of what you're suggesting, is that we, the city, would fund it. And then find a mechanism that you feel that we should get to reciprocate and get the funds back. And I think that is a very difficult task for us to accomplish. But
Jennifer, do you think with kind of what's been discussed, you would be able to, as staff comes back with proposals, have something where there could be a balance between these two things?
Nothing comes to mind right now. I'm in agreement with the mayor. I like the idea of trying to figure out how to help and maybe even subsidize some of these costs, but I don't know of a mechanism. We tried to go for the federal funding for that development you were talking to, and we didn't get any money. Nothing comes to mind.
Carmen? Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, is there any programs out there kind of like the URA, but for residential developments, where a certain portion of taxes is allocated to the development of a specific area? I don't know if that makes any sense.
yeah, it does.
Or-
In fact, if League of Oregon Cities, I think a few of us have been around, and you can do that. In fact, Phil Marler is one of the ones that suggested it when they're there. But I don't know if this is an urban renewal, but you set up a special area that's urban renewal for housing and residential, and then you have that that be built out. And those funds that come in, you can help, you borrow against it, and then you pay it back through the development. But you got to set up the fund and set it up that way. And I'm not sure, and it's usually done for a large area. So it's not just a small area. So it's a little bit different.
I think it was Woodburn that did it.
Yeah, maybe Woodburn, and I think they were doing like 100 acres or 50 acres or something like that. Or like this 70 acres for the 400 homes, something like that potentially.
Well, I'm just looking in this little corner, and there's a lot of undeveloped land right there.
Yeah,
I
but-
don't know how big of a space would be under, some kind of blanket focus area for a residential development program of some sort. But, I'm thinking like, okay, we've tried to incentivize building through, freezing of the tax base for 10 years to get to the point where you can build your infrastructure on and pay the taxes on just the land. Maybe there's some kind of reverse thing that we can do where, we, I don't know, wrap in some kind of cost of the development for this infrastructure for that 10 years, and you still don't have to pay for the, you have to pay for this part, but you don't have to pay for the taxes for your new development for the first 10 years, but at least we're getting housing on the market. I don't know. Just trying to come up with some ideas, and maybe something will stick, or somebody will be like, oh, I heard that you can do it this way. I don't know. I'm just searching for for straws at this point.
But are you talking about one single individual residential facility?
No, I'm talking like, so let's say we have a residential area, like I'm saying, just to the west of this infrastructure or intersection, there's 15 acres. I don't know how it would be developed, but or even if the owner would want to develop it, I would hope that they would, because we need help in finding more ways to build in this community. But you know, you look at this and you're like, okay, so here's the deal. We'll freeze taxes for the 10 years on your built infrastructure. You will have to pay for maybe the infrastructure on the roads to get access to your development, but then you know, you at least get this tax break based on your built environment for the dwellings that you're building. Or, you know, maybe there's a way that we could use the tax structure in which, you know, there's a frozen base, and then anything as the taxes go up, we could put this money into the infrastructure of this undeveloped land. You know, I'm just trying to search for any ideas that anybody might be aware of to where we can find solutions to hone in certain spaces where there is available land, more than just like a couple of small plots, but larger areas, and be like, we want to develop this area. These are the, you know, the tools in which we can help somebody look at this and get some people interested in building houses to our standards. I don't really know what it looks like, but I'm just trying to, like I said, grasp at straws here.
Well, we have a lot of things in place, a lot of tools in place. We did the MUPD already, which is a multi-year tax assessment of 10 years. If it's a fourplex or more, they can get taxes, no taxes for 10 years, abatement. We have urban renewal areas that are set up. Perfect example is the 100 acres the port has. I'm going to just keep reiterating that. That's in an urban renewal district that housing can be developed, and what you're talking about, it could be done. And so we could initiate those in other areas, that if we had property that maybe that's something we want to do with the 16 acres by the hospital. I don't know, but those all things are possible. But in this one-off is where I guess I'm having problems connecting it, because I don't know how to help this individual in any aspect financially. Larger developments, we can find ways to get there, but individual ones like this, it's just difficult for me to find a way without us, and we can, fronting the money and paying for it, which is an option.
I guess I'm not looking at just solving this one problem, which I realize is what staff's trying to get us to focus on. I'm looking at the fact that there's a bunch of undeveloped land around that area, and it makes sense for us to look at how do we provide infrastructure to make this a developable space, and would it solve a problem for the one-off, you know, family who wants to build there? Yeah. But would it also behoove us to do that because there's many other undeveloped assets in that area, and maybe it'll help increase focus towards development in that area? I'm not saying let's build it for this one person, take a $400,000 hit. I'm not saying that, but I am wondering what tools that are at our disposal to do that. And I am aware of the MUPD, and I'm trying to figure out a way to dovetail that with not just multifamily dwellings, but I guess multiple units built in single family dwelling scenarios. But those would require the infrastructure that is so costly that we want to set as the standard. So.
Sorry, I really appreciate this council's big picture viewpoint, and Carmen, I think, yes, those are all things that I think we'd all like. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that is not what staff is asking us to do this evening. And I think we were all in agreement that we did not want to lessen the standards. So I think that's where the conversation starts. And maybe that's how we move forward. And then if we want to come back and have another conversation about some of these other objectives, we could do that. Stephanie, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
I'm sorry.
no, that's totally fine. That's kind of what I was saying. We need to answer the question tonight before
Well, I think we already
for
did.
staff.
We
And
already-
then also, I think we can't even address the comments that Counselor Matthews is talking about until we talk to the landowners. And, I mean, we're honestly putting the cart before the horse on a lot of this stuff, because people sometimes just hold land because it's an asset. We don't know if there are any plans to develop it, and it could be 20, 30, 40 years down the road. So I think if you have the information you're looking for, that was the question tonight.
So we all agree that the resolution should be changed to meet the standards that we just talked about. And as far as financing other projects, availability stuff, I guess that's always going to be out there, and we can always look at it and see if other communities are doing it. We're doing everything that I know of at this time, but that doesn't mean there's not something else out there to potentially look at. So we'll move forward. All right, does everyone agree that we'll come, we have another shot at this. This resolution will come back with the changes that we talked about tonight, but for us on our next council meeting. So if we want, or whatever council meeting, and then we have another chance to discuss it. Is everyone all right with that? All right. Next item, a discussion regarding annual adjustment to the city fee schedule. Chelsea.
Yes, Mayor, City Council. So, we've been through budget, and also know that, you know, it's a council goal to be efficient in our business. We have a fee schedule that we regularly review, particularly through the moorage section. There is a piece in there that allows, a mechanism that allows for annual adjustments based on the municipal cost index, but it's only specific to the moorage. So every year, staff divisions have an opportunity to look at the fee schedule and is it keeping up with cost of services? But the reality is that that's not, they're not always taking a hard look at that just because staff time, resources, it's not always a reality. And so this year we want to ask the question, can we implement a mechanism in the fee schedule across the board that would allow for a regular annual increase based on something such as the municipal cost index? What staff is looking at and recommending is what City of North Bend has imposed. It's based on the Social Security cost of living adjustment, which kind of is more reflective of the city's business, and as wages, you know, are out in the community increase, our fee schedule would increase based on that fluctuation. And that would kind of just be an annual regular increase so that we know that our fees are keeping up with cost of service. But part to that also is we want to take a look at our current fees at a level that accounts for the cost of service. And so I think what we can do this year, we have HUD has stepped in and is going to help us complete the efficiency assessment of our permitting procedures, but they're also going to help look at the financial parts of, you know, help us with our financial piece. And this could be a part that they could help us with, look at our base level fees and see, are they at a level that's reflective of the cost of doing business. But that would be something that would come later. And so we are asking, is there a factor that would be acceptable to council by which we could impose regular annual increases? Is that Social Security cost of living adjustment an acceptable factor? If so, we'd like to implement that sooner rather than later, just to help us, because we don't think that we're keeping up with cost of service. And so just to help us get on track, and then we would come back later with actual study of the base fees. And I know Nicole has included some information about what, like, the fee schedule and then what those different cost indexes look like. And so, for example, the Social Security cost of living index increase just last year was 3.2%. The year before was 8.7, but there's been years where it's been 0. So, don't know if council has any feelings.
What you're asking is that instead of reacting and changing these fees, however, every couple of years, you're asking for something that's set, that is adjusted every year.
Yeah, and so kind of like what we do for sewer, wastewater rates, we have a kind of regular annual increase so that we're not coming to, coming every 5-10 years with a huge percentage increase. We'd like to get something started now that allows for that regular kind of easier increase.
Chelsea, you mentioned North Bend did this, but are there other cities that you're aware of that do this?
I know that there are other cities that make regular increases. I'm not 100% certain of what their cost, what the index is that they're looking at to make those increases.
I'm concerned with using North Bend as an example because they have a very different situation occurring over there in that they cannot just go over a certain percentage. I feel like we have to, when it comes to fees like these, I think we really need to take a look at it each year. I'm not comfortable with just saying we're going to raise it so that we don't have these big increases down the road. I mean, if it warrants a big increase because it costs us more to do it, I don't have a problem with that, but I just don't think that, I feel a little differently about our fee schedule across the board. I want to make sure we're covering our costs, but I don't think we need to do it just because we want to get an increase every year and we're building, it doesn't feel right to me.
I agree with Councillor Kilmer on this one. I could maybe get behind it if I knew that there were a lot of cities doing the exact same thing, but since the only example we have before us is the city of North Bend, and their situation is different, I don't mind the fee schedule. If we need to review it annually and it comes before us annually and we look at that, maybe that's the solution instead of every couple of years. But I agree with Councillor Kilmer.
The only problem I see doing that is that it's going to take a lot of staff time to sit down and do an analysis every year on this. And we have annual costs that go up. I mean, we just met with our unions, and I think, I'm not sure we're asking me this, but we're at what, 4% a year? Probably, something like that. Is that correct, Melissa, do you know? 4% probably? And then our insurance costs go up, and our PERS go up. We have annual costs that go up every year. So what you're suggesting is that we not try to adjust for those costs. And whether we like it or not, we have them every year. So I'm going to just want to remind everyone, since 2000, and we did this in the budget committee, since 2016 to now, we have over $1.5 million more in cost in just PERS and insurance. That doesn't count the fees that we have done in negotiations on, on increased cost, salary costs. So just keep that in mind, that's all. So Carmen, Drew, how do you feel?
I'm eyeballing the rates, the indexing to the Social Security COLA is a useful number to get it done quickly, but as you can see in it, an increase of staffing cost 4% a year. COLA increases do not usually reflect 4% a year, so it's disjointed from the rate we see around personnel, and of course personnel are substantial expense in most of the things that involve permits. So yeah, I'm not sure about using the Social Security cost of living adjustments for that purpose. It looks convenient, I'm just not sure it would be practical. On the other hand, as you mentioned, it takes a lot of staff time to bring us back do an analysis of fees and come back every time. So, yeah, I don't have a good suggestion on this one off the top.
I think that cost is part of doing business, the cost of evaluation. I had to do it when I ran a business, and this is a business, and I think that's just something that we have to look at. We project whether it's private or it's public.
Yeah, but we have a fixed cost that we're not going to happen. We already know there's going to be a 4% increase. Theoretically, I think it's 4% on Ask Me. We also know there's going to be a PERS increase of $250,000 if you allocate it out and divide it up in insurance costs. So you know you have a fixed cost of at least 4% a year, at least, if nothing else. So I mean, I think we need to think about that. Whether the social security COLA is correct, maybe another COLA, or maybe another way to do it, CPI, maybe there's something else you want to think about. What they're saying is that we need to find a way to get ahead of this, and we haven't been. We went from $20 on some business licenses to $100, and I heard lots of complaints of like, what happened? How do you jump that high? So anyway,
Well, I will remind you that I said I thought it was too low several years ago.
I understand, but we didn't do anything about it, and so all of a sudden we had to react. And so I'm just thinking about maybe not reacting, and maybe there's a different COLA or CPI or another mechanism. But I think even if maybe there's a way that our finance department can get in there and figure out, okay, it's going to cost us 4% here plus the PERS allocation and the insurance allocation. So now our costs are going to be at least 6% a year. Maybe there's a better way to do it that way. And those will be actual costs. I don't know.
Well, I think for me, Drew's argument and your argument is compelling. I hear you. Give me, I would prefer you come back with another solution in terms of what other cities are doing other than just one city, I guess is where I'm coming from.
Understood.
And I just think that, you know, if we just automatically raise rates every year, we're doing exactly what the public thinks that we're doing, and that is just automatically raising. I think we have to have justification for raising those costs, and we should.
Well, I think we can do actual cost comparisons. Maybe it's easy for me to say, but I don't know, Melissa might be able to figure it out. But we know that we, right now, we just did a 3-year contract, I believe. We know it's going to go up 4% every year. We know that the biennium for PERS was $250,000. If you allocate those costs out among all the employees and figure it out in that department, and the insurance cost increases. So I imagine, I'm just guessing, that we're probably looking at 6% fixed cost increase, and maybe we come back with that. And then we can say 6%, 6%, 6%. We do another negotiation in 3 years, and we can do the adjustments. Maybe that's the way to go.
Well, I think Councilor Kilmer brings up a really great point that if we're going to do this, we have to tell them why we're doing it.
Sure,
And
well,
if,
this would
and if
explain
it's
it.
PERS and if it's that, then yeah, I can understand that.
And
We have to pay for services.
I also think it's important to note that sometimes when those costs go up, you have to make other adjustments within, and that means that we could potentially be raising something, but we may not have the personnel that's costing that amount, that part of doing business. In other words, we react sometimes in private sector where we have to make adjustments with the number of employees that we have, and just to raise rates, there may be other things that we have to adjust as well to keep that in line with what.
Well, and that's an
People can
option.
afford.
That's an option. What with us, with the city, and there's just something I'm missing, what it is that's personnel. So our bottom line is if we need to cut costs, we cut personnel, which means we cut services. So I think we need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, exactly, and that means that we tell them that this is what's gonna happen. The services are impacted by that.
So were we thinking examples of other cities of like size and what they do, and then come back and we can look at it?
Well, or we can do actual costs. I mean, if we can do actual costs, then that Councilor Kilmer's philosophy is, addressed. And
But I
I'm not
also
sure we can do
agree.
that. Maybe we can't, but I don't know.
I agree with Councilor Farmer that it would be nice if we can find like-sized cities doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think that we can do both. I think we can try to find some similar cities and what they're doing, and also work with finance to see what are those fixed, known cost increase,
Okay.
that percentage is.
Carmen, that sound all right to you?
Yeah, I'm on the fence on which way to go. Both of them sound pretty good, laying out a 3-year percentage increase based on known costs that are coming down the line that we can explain makes total sense to me, but so does seeing how other cities are coping with it. Although, I mean, that's extra staff time, but they might not be getting it right either. I mean, we know our fixed costs, as you're mentioning, Mayor, and those costs are coming, whether it's happening, whether we like it or not, and also whether other cities are raising their rates appropriately or not. In business, I see that all the time. We raise our rates constantly based on things that are happening, and the businesses that don't, have to figure out how to navigate not having the resources that they need to stay afloat. So, I don't know. For me, it's like, look at the fixed costs we know we got coming, make sure we're making that mark and balancing that intended service level that we're expecting out of ourselves. So I'd be down with either one, I guess. So
Okay.
it sounds like Chelsea could go either way as well.
Troy?
Yeah, I think costs going up a fixed percent every year is pretty no. I mean, and you said 4%, but I mean, I think they're going to go up. Salaries are going up, insurance is going up, costs continue to go up. But I think the consensus that I heard was, let's take a little time, see what other cities are doing, and see if we can get at least some general idea, and then we can have a better frame of reference to make a decision from.
All right. I think you got it, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda, continuation of discussion regarding potential amendments to the rules of the city council. So those items were in here. So let me, first of all, let's just see if I can eliminate one. I think we all agreed that the council comments should not be limited in time. Am I correct?
Agreed.
Carmen, Troy, you both agree?
Agree.
Agreed.
Okay, so we can eliminate that one. So then we get into the other items. Well, you already said no in your head. I noticed that you both noticed your head, and so did Drew, right? Oh, boy. All right. Public comments. Is it the first item on the agenda? Should this section reside towards the end of the agenda or not?
Are you wanting feedback?
Yes, of
Okay,
course.
great.
Unless you want me to go first.
Nope, I'm happy to. I think moving it to the end of the agenda would be my preference. And I believe that the 3-minute time period that we've had has worked well for us. I know we have some citizens who would appreciate more time, but I think 3 minutes is the appropriate amount of time.
Who's next?
My comment would be, I don't have a problem with that, but I do feel it is important that I hear from the public before I make a decision, not after. So that would be affected by the agenda items.
Mine would be similar to Stephanie's. I preferred the comments at the front because that's what I like when I show up to meetings. I would prefer, but as long as I can hear from folks on the agenda items, then I'm okay with the broader public comments being at the end.
Carmen, Troy?
I would echo Councilor Farmer's direction. As long as I could hear on individual topics, I'm good, and it could go towards the end. But you know, if you just have something random to say, you have to sit through a 1 to 3 hour meeting. That, I don't know. It's not exactly encouraging public comment, in my opinion. So I think I would actually like to see it towards the beginning.
Troy?
I would like to see it at the beginning as well.
Okay, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. No, go ahead.
Did you anything else to add except you wanted it at the beginning?
We have more to discuss over this the general issue, correct?
Yes.
I suppose I'll say it now. I was thinking about our conversation last time. And I think if we have public comment throughout the meeting, there's some sort of false feeling that the individuals that show up to the meeting are part of our decision-making process. And while I want to hear everything that somebody shows up has to say, I think we have to remember we were elected to represent the entire city, not just the people that show up. So while I think it's vitally important we hear from the public, I also think that we have to remember that, again, we are representing the entire community, and that's just one or a few individuals of the public that have their say. that implies that one member of the public's opinion carries a greater weight than the remaining community members. And I think it sets a bad precedent. And again, I think we're elected to represent the entire community, and it is our charge to be educated on the issues coming in front of us and make those decisions to the best of the ability in the best interest of the city as a whole, and avoid the emotion of any given event. Keeping the public comment to the beginning and limiting that time is fair across the board, allows people who show up to express their opinions and viewpoints, but allows us to continue to do the work that we were elected to do for the city.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I believe it still should be at the end, and the reason being, and I understand what everyone else has said about being at the beginning, I think it should be at the end, excuse me. And the reason being is I don't know how many council meetings I've been at, and I don't know how many items at public comments at the beginning was addressing any agenda item. I can't think of very many. I not more than a handful. These public comments are usually here to address something that's different than what's on the agenda. Very rarely have I seen somebody come up and say, I want to make a public comment about agenda item 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever the item is in the agenda item. I just have never heard it. So my point is they come to show up and talk about something that they have an issue with, which is great. That's what they should do. But should we also allow those public comments to disrupt at the beginning, and that's what's happening, that's why we changed it, disrupt the agenda and the council meetings, because we have people show up to make presentations, staff to show up and give a testimony or whatever. We have an agenda to try to get through, and because of it, we've got ourselves, at times, having the public comments at the beginning, we've run into time constraints, our own time constraints that we've set up, because we can't get through our agenda. And so is that fair? So I don't know.
I think we're in control of that, though. I mean, we don't have to let that happen. We have a certain amount of time and a certain amount of minutes, and you're free to say whatever you wish to say. It is public comment. It can be germane to what we're talking about that evening, or it can be something clear out of left field. That is your time to just say something to us as a council.
I agree, but if it's at the beginning of the meeting and they do it, and that there's 50 people here and they each have 3 minutes or even cut it down to 2, what's happening, this has already happened, I mean, I think it's happened this year, we got kicked out, our time limit got kicked. We had to adjourn a meeting because we couldn't finalize the agenda.
But that happens very rarely.
I
And it's
understand.
usually a pretty emotional topic. Is a good compromise then to have public comments, whether or not they want to comment on an agenda item or whatever at the beginning, get through the public comments and then just do the business, not take public comment on each agenda item? I feel like there are times when we do have an agenda item on there that people come to speak about. And you know, my priority is always to citizens within the boundaries of the city limits. Those are the people we hear from first.
So,
Well,
then
those aren't the people that we hear from first when they come
no,
to
so
the
then
meeting.
that's
And
another thing.
that's why,
Well, then the
that's
council,
why it should be limited to 3 minutes.
well, then the council rules need to be changed, that we're going to allow only citizens in the Coos Bay to speak, but we haven't done
Well,
that.
I am an advocate of anyone that comes before the city council being able to speak. I think
agree.
the citizens of Coos Bay have the priority over a non-citizen.
All right, so we have,
Can I
let's
ask
see.
a question, Mr. Mayor?
Of
Sorry,
course.
for Councilor Kilmers, just so I'm clear. So Councilor Kilmer, you're saying keep public comment at the beginning and then no comments during the entire meeting. And Mayor Benetti, you're saying put the public comments at the end, and can people make comments for each item on the agenda?
I only think if it's
relevant.
If it's relevant to a public comment. I mean, for instance, if we have public input, like we normally do, you know, this ordinance, we're gonna have a public comment, public period, close it down. And the only reason I keep saying that is because, again, there might have been an issue or two that someone at the public comment came and talked about an agenda item. Now, it happened at our last meeting, but we knew what it was about, and it was a hearsay information. It was, that was not even pertinent to the agenda item, and we took care of it. But anyway, I think it should be at the end, but I don't know. And Troy, you think it should be at the beginning? Carmen, you think it should be at the beginning? Drew, also?
Correct.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I will, I will say that I hear what you're saying, Mayor. We have a lot of people we're here to get some business done, and we have people waiting to give presentations, and so either way, we're either gonna make everybody who's here to do business wait, or we're gonna make people who are waiting to make comments wait. And, I don't know. I was thinking that I wanted it at the beginning, but I could go the other way around as long as we have the ability to comment on each agenda item. So I guess that's right back to yours and I believe Drew's preference.
Okay.
I've been attending meetings, not just Coos Bay Council meetings, for the better part of 30 to 35 years. And I've just never been in a place where I felt like as a member of the public, I couldn't comment to a city council, even if it wasn't on an agenda items. Whether or not it's pertinent to what decision I make at this dais, I think it's important that we always encourage the public to attend our meetings, whether it's virtually or through an email or whatever. That's we're elected. And the optics that it puts on if we say we're not going to accept anything until the end, it just goes against my.
We do that at the airport.
I'll chuck a thought out there I've been having.
I don't know. I just.
So anyway, I understand where
against
everyone's coming
my
from.
grain, I guess.
I mean, go ahead.
Just thought I've been having is, I feel like over the last year, we've made a lot of changes around the public comments, and a bunch of us have been on here since 2016. We've gone through some wild timeframes, and it was, I think the whole time, you could comment at the start, you could comment on the items, and it ran us long a couple times, but it stayed that way. And it seems like over the last year, we've tinkered with it more and more. I'm not sure we need to.
Well, situations dictated that we address it. So
Yeah.
I don't care. I mean, if you want to move it back, I have no problem moving it back. We can do that. But then I think that we need to be careful about allowing individual public comments on each agenda item, which we used to do anyway.
Yeah.
If you remember, we used to have public comments at the beginning, and we used to interact with the public on agenda items that came up if they were concerned about, or even their public comments. We don't do that anymore.
And the elephant in the room, quite honestly, is what I have been saying to many in this room, is that there is no civility left.
Nope.
So when we have members of the public come up, there's no civility. And so I think the frustration is we wouldn't be in this situation, right? We're making these edits because we want the other citizens in the room to feel like they can be engaged in this process. And to Councillor Cribben's point, yes, we don't represent the person in the room, we represent the entire city, and we should be making our decisions for, the greater good of all the citizens of this community. And I think we do that. And I also hear your point, Councillor Kilmer, of yes, but I do want to hear what the public has to say. But I think the reality is what I'm struggling with is just the civility of there is none anymore. And that's where I think, for me personally, I'm struggling with how do we do this in a way that still engages the public. And I guess my comment would be, fine, we want to leave public comment in the beginning, fine. We want to do 3 minutes, fine. But I want to make sure when people come to this dais that they are civil. This is a volunteer position. There is no money in this job. We do this for all of us, I believe, because we want to make our community better. And what I would ask is for those that come before us to be civil.
So let's see if we can wrap this up, because we can talk about this. I mean, I think there's pros and cons on both sides. Let's just move the public comments back to the beginning, not allow anyone to make any public comment on any agenda item. We'll maybe try to emphasize the public comments before they start, that if there's an agenda item they want to make a comment on, they should during public comments. And we could do that.
There you go.
Does that sound, and we'll keep it to 3 minutes, and we won't allow any extra time. I mean, I guess that's a possibility, but we will try to keep it 3 minutes, and then we'll go from there. And
Just-
again,
Just
these
a
are,
question.
Sure.
And don't our council rules allow you as the presiding officer to say, you know, let's say we have a room full of people and a lobby full of people and people waiting out on the front steps to come in, I mean, we can limit the amount of time, can't we, that we take public comments so that we can get to the business of the city?
in the council rules, if you look at it, it also say if there's a group, we ask them to have a representative to speak. So we can do that.
But I also want us to address civility.
No, I
And
agree.
I
No,
think we
mean,
have to
so-
some degree, but yeah, we need to make sure that we address that.
So I want to also, in the council rules, I've read them multiple times, and in the council rules, if I am lax in my duties of being civility, making sure it's here, any counselor has a right to step in and have that followed also. So anyway, sometimes I let people, I feel that they need, if they're going to speak for the 3 minutes, I allow the 3 minutes, and sometimes I should cut them off because they're not following protocol and being respectful. So I think we can still read what we have here before we start the public comments. We'll have at the beginning. Council comments, we won't limit the amount of time. The agenda order is being changed because we're moving public comments forward. And the agenda item should be there being up, and we're not going to allow any public input on every agenda item because we're going to ask the public up front. Agreed?
And I just want to say that, to Councilor DeNovo's point, that there are very rare occasions where you have someone come up there and they're not exercising, speaking in a manner of civility. I think it is the exception, not
Sure.
the
Yeah,
rule.
right.
For the
Okay.
most part,
But
people
it's-
adhere
it's-
to the
it's
time
those-
limits.
It's a bad apple that ruins it for everyone, right, type thing?
I think
All
we've
right.
had more occasions this year than in the other 7.
No kidding.
And
Carmen,
that can be addressed by addressing
Yep.
the citizen
Carmen?
point that I made.
Agreed. I think the civility thing, you really hit it there, Councilor DeNovo. I think we as a counseling body really need to set the tone and be real strong in requiring that. And you know, we've been flexible in the past, and I think what it's coming to is we just really need to reassure everybody that civility and decorum is an absolute requirement for us to be able to conduct the work on behalf of the city. And I do think limiting to 3 is extremely important. So that's not to be said that if there's, you know, like some kind of retort that we need to have an additional discussion on, it could go past 3 minutes, but I think that could be a counselor discretion. Maybe I shouldn't even said that because it opens up new things, but
exactly. The way that, I don't know if we need to change that at this time. I mean, I think there's other options or opportunities for the public to interact with the council if necessary, so. And if we feel it's something that needs to come back, we can make an agenda item. So.
Councillor Kilmer, I completely agree with you. 9 times out of 10, we have wonderful citizens
Yep.
that come up and give us comment. And to Drew's point, this past year has been more difficult. I just think it's not just this council, it's the state of the world where people are being less civil, and that's really where I was coming from.
Troy, what do you think?
I agree. I like moving to the front, keeping a time limit. Again, I think that the public comments are vital, but it is a city meeting held in the public. For us to best get the business done, we need to control that, and I'm 100% on board with Councilor DeNovo and the civility.
All right, so I think we tackled this. All right, and that being the case, we are at the public comment period, which is at the end. All right, so public comments. I don't even know if I have the, do I have the in here?
Get outside.
I know. All right, so we have 2 public comments, people speaking. So the public comment period is intended for the public to share ideas and concerns. It is not intended for the interactive discussion for council. There may be opportunities for public comments during specific agenda items. That's not true, and it will be. Members of the public are requested to confine their remarks to questions and issues under the discussion time during this time. During any designated comment period, individuals shall not engage in personal attacks, shall not impugn the motives of any speaker, and shall at all times while in session conduct themselves in an appropriate manner. No person shall make personal, impertinent, slanderous, or unauthorized remarks or become boisterous while addressing the council. Dean, you're first.
Mike volunteered to go first to break the ice. Is that okay?
Yeah. All right, Mike, you're it. I'm just going to switch this around.
Good evening. I'll try and be civil.
Thank you.
Tonight, my name is Mike Powder. I live up in Empire. I'm becoming a bike advocate, and I'm learning all the time on it. But a couple of things I wanted to bring up because it's good to see the city involved, but there's a couple of things I'm having a little difficulty with. We do have a livability committee here, which I have attended, but we've probably all got different opinions on what livability is. And so the meeting really isn't for me. It seems like a lot of discussion's just been on garbage and homelessness. So it's more of a homelessness and a garbage livability thing, because to me, livability is more about, low-speed streets, walkable streets, people being able to get around and parks and so on and so forth. There's a complete list of it here. Public places, convenience, safe crossings, just that's more on livability than what it seems to be. So I was suggesting that we maybe could change the name, because I was confused, and some people are confused when it says livability, but it doesn't seem to be any livability when you get to the meeting. So I'm not, it's great to do it, but it's just not cutting it for me. The other one is the bikes have been moved onto the Parks Department. And I've been to the Parks Department, and, like I say, we sit and we wait to say something. Nothing ever gets talked about at the Parks Department, I feel, on bikes. There's usually no direction. It's almost like there's a resistance to talk to things, because we've got a lot of things, people want alternate transportation in town. I've wanted it for a long time. So that's another thing, too, is, it needs to be, something needs to come up where we can have something that is a little more active for the biking infrastructure, the pedestrian infrastructure, and livability. A little more input. There's lots of stuff on the internet about it too, on livability and bike infrastructure and so forth. That's pretty much about it. When we have, as individuals, citizens, we've been getting involved with ODOT, and we've done some ride-arounds with the ODOT people, and we got to thinking about how they're thinking, and a lot of the challenges that affect us, because, one of my big peeves is the 101 it shouldn't be a freeway. It should be reduced speeds. To me, Paris is just, 30 kilometers per hour in the whole city of Paris. We have 45 miles an hour in the city of Coos Bay and North Bend, right by news stores and everything else, and by crosswalks and the whole works. So that's one thing that, I want to keep on harping on until I can hit the right people to maybe get some change on it. So that's about it for me, and
Thank you,
well
Mike.
within my 3 minutes.
Okay, appreciate it.
No worries.
Dean? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. You all. He was there. Okay, now, as Mike said, he alerted me, and we had 6 people, and our public works guy was there. ODOT came down and to meet with the public at the Salmon Room West, and we had 6 guys there. We hammered them pretty good about hey, our city needs to be brightened up. Just that our thing was pretty much signage. So I kind of I'll be civil. I kind of leaned on these guys, said, look, I've been leaving messages with these guys. Well, the guy called me the next day. John Lazur is his name. Called me the next day. I said, hey, okay, I'm sorry I called you. But he came down. We rode around. These guys have electric bikes. It wasn't fair. I'm not a cyclist. I'm kind of an activist. I work for kids. I give bikes away. Anyway, we rode around,
And I've got Jennifer's thing all figured out as far as getting Eric Clough's community bike shop, Charro Road, all figured out. John Lazur came down. I have a problem, though. If you look on the back of the Charro thing is easy. We just have to find the money, and I'm on that. They're going to come down. The next guy, the paint guy, called me after our ride, and his name is Steve Silva. We don't have any money. I said, don't worry about it. Can the public do it? He goes, well, I don't know. I've got a striping crew here in town, so it's a local business that'll do the striping. The Charro things aren't paint. They're a torch down plastic. They're serious stuff. And ours are worn out. The city needs to be brightened up. Like Reedsport is real pretty. But if you look on the back of that thing, it shows crosswalks. Well, you know, my thing is putting an aquatic park there at the old Unocal terminal dock. But I have to cross 101, and there's no crosswalks between like Newmark and the new plaza by so-and-so. The problem that I have, and they'll do it, but I have to come up with a couple fatalities to do the crosswalk. So that the other part, Jennifer's drawing that you hired those professional engineers, that's a beautiful drawing, and they'll come down. We need the city's support. If we... 1 minute. 1 minute. Well, anyway, I saw the thing that Jennifer's office did with that engineer deal on that Charro deal. There's a common, normal way to do it. We've got the striping people. This guy, Steve Silva, will come down and help work it out, and I'll find the money. But the other problem is the fatalities. I'm working on my crosswalk. But the Charro thing is not a problem.
Thanks, Dean.
Thank you very much.
All right, so since we can have council comments at the end, I just, first of all, Mike, I think you've instituted or got everyone thinking about bike paths. I was on Empire Mayor's Walk today, and it was brought up, and we talked about that in the Empire Blueprint Plan and the Front Street Blueprint Plan. So it's not something that we're ignoring. I think it's on our front minds all the time. Is the Parks Department the right place? Maybe, maybe not. I think it's something that's where to start. Eric and myself and Nicole had a discussion about this, and if we can find a better way to incorporate this in another committee, maybe we will, but we just don't have the availability right now. But I think it's a good start, and I'm pleased to see you and Eric and Dean and others involved in this. As far as Dean, ODOT, I've been hammering on them forever, and I can tell you that it's difficult to get them to move forward on things. Lucinda and I did the Front Street Blueprint Plan, and on 101, we've asked them to put parking, because you can park on 101 on both sides. But no one knows that because there's no striping to allow that. But if you did that, the traffic would slow down. Right. It's a given. But I still haven't seen it done. And these crosswalks, you're supposed to be able to crosswalk at any intersection, but they don't have the striping for it. So again, ODOT is one of our problems. So if you can get it done, great. That's my comment.
All we need is the city to give us the nod, and then we'll work on it. And there's a lot of money out there for it.
All right. Well, we can put that on the agenda to look into and go from there. Okay, those are my council comments. Anyone else?
I just wanted to, yesterday on Memorial Day, Mayor Benetti and I went up to the Pioneer Cemetery at Marshfield, and I just wanted to thank Cricket and her daughter. And I know there's so many people that work so diligently to keep that cemetery in good shape. And it was just a beautiful day to be out there, and so much history. And so just really wanted to say thank you to Cricket and all of those who have touched that place that make it meaningful for us to go honor the dead. So thanks.
Anyone else?
I just had a question, and Nicole's not here, but maybe somebody else can look into this. We sold the property that was purchased for the library across or next door to the Dodge dealership. Do we know what is happening? Because it's still a big, old grassy lot.
Yep.
And that was, you know, I was an advocate of selling that to the Dodge owner, but I also had a plan in front of me that showed some infrastructure development on that property, and I haven't seen anything other than an occasional Bobcat, you know, piece of equipment, and I would like to see that developed.
Yeah, so we have had conversations with the owner, who has suggested they have larger plans for development, but aren't ready to move forward yet. So in the interim, they are kind of using it as a place to sell their Bobcat equipment. And so you're right, nothing has really actually moved forward yet. They have expressed intent, just that the timing is not right. So I don't know the actual, you know, if they actually intend to move forward or if there's a reason why it's stalled. I can just say that we have had conversations within the last 6 months about it.
This is the exact thing I'm talking about. So when that came before us, we made a decision. We were told that it was going to be large farm supply, I think, on that parcel of land, and we made a decision to
With a
move forward
building.
with it because there was
And
going to be a
landscape.
building and all of the things, and this is the exact example of that not happening. And Councillor Kilmer is asking the question, and now we're hearing potentially that it might be used for something else. And I know each situation is different, but are we being consistent? Do we have in all of our agreements that this needs to be done within a certain period of time? And if it's not done within a certain period of time, then there are consequences to that. I know, Chelsea, you can't answer all of that. That's me being really passionate right now, but this is exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, I think Nate could answer this. There's not, we didn't put any restriction on the title.
I don't think we have any kind of restrictions on it.
Right.
We just sold it to them.
Right. We didn't put a
They
restriction.
made representation.
Is it possible in the future when we do something like this to put?
Oh, certainly,
Yeah.
you can put a
We could've.
restriction.
Because this is the second
requirements.
time, not for this piece of property,
Yeah.
but for another piece of property.
But bear in mind, if you do that and they don't do it, then you gotta buy it back from them, so. You know,
Well,
but
I
it
mean,
gives
I
you
know.
options, gives you
Right.
options.
I think it's something to keep in mind.
I agree.
Right. There was no title restriction, and since there isn't, there's no obligation for anyone to move forward that we sell a piece of property unless we do something like that.
Hopefully when he does, it's really nice.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. The council comments, anyone? We've had them earlier, but if you want to chime in at the end here,
I think I'm good. I've been long-winded.
okay. Troy, anything?
Sorry, I had to come over to the mute button. No, I'm good. Yeah,
Okay.
I agree. I think I've said enough.
And Drew, I bypassed you, anything? All right. Well, thank you, everyone. It was a good work session, and we will adjourn the work session and see you at the next council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.